It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. And we begin with President Bola Tinubu, who has assured that his administration will continue to prioritize the welfare of the poor and most vulnerable, saying his government's economic reforms have started to bear fruit. Tinubu gave the assurance Wednesday night in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, when Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, paid him a courtesy call. A release issued by Advisor on Information and Strategy to the President, Bayo Onanuga, said Tinubu acknowledged that his administration's reforms had weakened the purchasing power of many Nigerians during the meeting held on the sidelines of the G20 Leaders Summit. But the president said his government will continue to provide social safety nets to cushion the unintended consequences. Congratulating the IMF chief on her election for a second term, President Tinubu appreciated her support in implementing the reforms, calling for more institutional backing for stability and sustainable growth.
She came specifically to commend the president on the reforms that the president started. They are very strong reforms, very difficult to implement and sustain. And the IMF is so pleased that we've been able to sustain it, and especially because they're beginning now to see that the reforms are effective and that the benefits are now beginning to be felt by Nigerians. So they came to pledge more support for the reforms and for the administration, and specifically offering technical assistance for budget support. Second area for technical support that they're offering is in the area of our fiscal, monetary, and structural reforms. The third area is in the area where they can help us to create more fiscal space and then helping us to then attract more concessionary funding from different development partners.
Wonderful. Well, great to see her again. I know she was before in the Ministry of Trade, but it seems that the presidential team has found space for her. But let's speak about the meeting between the president and the new IMF boss.
At first, I'll say I miss both of you so greatly, and I'm happy to be back here. You see, the truth has to be said. If the reforms are working, President Tinubu will not need to mouth it that they are working. They are not working. And I'm going to tell you a quick story today about the IMF. I'll take you back to the 70s in Britain. When Britain went to meet IMF, James Callaghan's government went to meet IMF to give him 3.9 billion, as at then when they had the Forex crisis and other crises after the Berber boom, the Anthony Berber boom of 72. What happened? IMF brought out very strict sanctions that Britain should cost its fiscal budgets, so about 2 to 3 billion. And that created something called the winter of discontents. You know what that led to? That led to Margaret Thatcher winning elections convincingly in 79. And that's what the IMF does with all of their punitive measures. These reforms have not worked. Let's stop deceiving ourselves. A president going to admit that the purchasing power of his people have been eroded, that's an admittance of failure. Because all of this was supposed to increase the purchasing power at some point when things stabilize. But you devalue the currency, you are grappling with increased inflation. Even the conditional transfer doesn't mean anything today again. If you buy 25,000 naira, as at before the value of the currency was devalued, and compared to 25,000 naira now, it doesn't mean anything again. The petroleum subsidies you remove, people can't even buy the fuel at the pumps again. So what is working? Oh, they will tout some data. They will say, oh, we've got a trade surplus. You've got trade surplus because your currency is depressed. CFR to the Naira is about 2 to 3 to 1. The CFR is more than the Naira as we speak today. The currency of West African nations that we used to gain trade advantage over, then people will go and buy cheaper goods from Benin Republic and all of that to come and sell here because the currency is cheaper. Today, their currency is more expensive than the Naira. And look at it. Look at the budget you keep taking loans to buffer. Nothing has happened with the budget. Last year, budget estimated that over 2 trillion was padded in the budget. So most of the loans are frittered away in corruption and budget padding. Should we start telling the tales of Oji River College and how they use that to pad all sorts of budget? Should we start telling the tale of how orientation agencies now pay for pregnancy advocacy and how they pad the budget? Should we go on and on? So Senator Ningi was right. So the reforms are not bearing fruits. There are 2 ways when you're in a quagmire to come out. It's either the Keynesian theory that you spend your way out, or the other method of ensuring that you have growth prospect in the economy, which we are looking at by saying we want to be able to ramp up production and get 2 million barrels. But how is that going? When you also already have forward sales. So the reforms are not working, the reforms are killing, and it has become a winter of discontent in Nigeria. It's a sad Christmas. Let's tell him the truth.
Okay, it's not Christmas yet, but we can talk about IMF. IMF, created in 1944 as part of those, international organs post-World War II to reduce poverty, to promote international trade, to provide support for underdeveloped and vulnerable countries. That Nigeria sits at the table on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Brazil. And we have Georgieva Kristileva, Georgiana Kristileva, praising Nigeria for its programs and all of that. I think in itself it's a sad issue. Because in 1986, I recall that when the Babangida administration wanted to take IMF loan, it was a big issue in Nigeria, with Nigerians holding debates and saying Nigeria should not take the IMF pill. The IMF pill will mean conditionalities, will mean that it may not necessarily be to the benefit of your people. So that's where I think Rufai Osini is coming from, about the winter of discontent in Britain. But here, we have Nigeria sitting comfortably at the same table with the IMF. And the IMF has been very consistent in praising Nigeria for its economic reforms. What are these economic reforms? Removal of fuel subsidy, harmonization of foreign exchange regime and all of that, which our president admits himself has been giving hardship to the people, has made life difficult to the people. Only yesterday, House of Representatives gave approval to the Tinubu administration to borrow more money. We are still going to borrow more money, 1.7 trillion, in another category, for bonds that have been placed by the Nigerian government. So Nigeria today is in greater debt than it was at any time. One of the major achievements of the Obasanjo administration, that our debt was rescheduled. We got debt wiped out by the Paris Club of Creditors. We're in a deeper hole today than we were. And now IMF is praising us. President Tinubu and Georgiana Kristileva have said that the government is providing for the welfare of the poor and the vulnerable. And the IMF chief was saying, Nigeria's social investment programs are in order. Yes, IMF has been consistent in saying so. World Bank has been consistent in saying so. In the annual reports, assessments that they do on Nigeria, they have been saying so. But we, the Nigerian people, we, the poor and vulnerable, including all of us here that have a microphone put in our mouths, we are the poor and vulnerable people of Nigeria.
Yes.
I don't see what this social investment program is doing. We don't even have a national social register that you can say is authentic and is valid. I don't know anybody who knows anybody who has collected money from that national social register. These poor and vulnerable Nigerians, what percentage of them are they out of the over 100 million people that are living in abject poverty? So, but IMF will deal with data, they say. They will deal with statistics, they say. They will deal with country reports. The IMF chief should come to Nigeria and spend a week here and listen to we, the poor and the vulnerable of Nigeria, to be able to know whether a lot is happening. President Tinubu also said at that meeting that Nigeria is looking at tax reforms to stimulate growth and economy. That in itself is a major issue. That in itself is a major issue in Nigeria, with disagreement between the states and the lawmakers and the presidency as to how far Oyedele's tax reforms can take us.
Right. So much to unpack here, but I'm one who's always been consistent to say I'm always wary when one is complimented or given a pat on the back from Bretton Woods institutions. But today I'll spare you the lecture on, different economic policies and theories and what type of outcomes they may yield. I thought this statement was quite interesting because just last week, Friday, the deputy director of the IMF here in Nigeria made a presentation at the Lagos Business School for the outlook for sub-Saharan Africa as of October 2024. Her name is Catherine Patio, and she didn't give such an optimistic analysis or assessment of the progress of the current reforms. Well, I'll try to unpack some of this because the statements by Catherine Patio were widely reported on in Nigerian media, with many going as far as saying that the IMF has reported that the reforms are not working in Nigeria. Anyway, let's look at it. What does the IMF look at when they're looking at success or failure of reform? They simply look at macroeconomic indices because ultimately their reforms are all about macroeconomic stability. Fine, let's look at that. What are the parameters involved? Foreign currency, foreign exchange stability. Dr. Abati just alluded to the $2.2 billion loan that has been approved by the National Assembly this week. Now, the curious thing for me about this $2.2 billion loan is that it's pegged at an exchange rate of 800 naira to the dollar. Now, if we have foreign exchange stability, number one, why are we pegging our budget to a pegged exchange rate? That's number one. Number two, why does the government get to enjoy an exchange rate of 800 naira to the dollar when the common man is trading at about 1,700 naira? This reminds me of some of the arbitrage that has happened in the past with these exchange rate discrepancies. So my question is, what's happening to that differential? Because you can't tell me that everybody who is getting this money out of government at the rate of 800 naira is now going to spend it in a very diligent and honest way. Some people, that money is going to find its way to the black market, and somebody is making a profit off of it. It's very simple. We've seen this type of arbitrage here before. It has made billionaires overnight. So that's the first thing. Fine. Let's look at more macroeconomic indices. Inflation, we're sitting at 33.8%. This is an alarming figure. I'm not sure this is a positive outlook. It would be positive if maybe this was a reduction from something else, but it continues to climb, and we know that it's driven by fuel price, and that is still not, the situation with our fuel supply chain and our ecosystem is still not yet under control, although we continue to talk about how it's been deregulated. So there are so many things that one can look at to unpack. Before we even look at our own bread and butter issues, the economic indices themselves are not really reflecting positive results. And very quickly, before I round up, the president after this, or rather it may have been before, in his address as a Nigerian president at the G20, made a statement that was concerning. He said Africa is crying for support. No, sir, Africa is not crying for support. Africa has all that it needs to prosper, to grow, to move forward, and to feed each and every one of our citizens. Africa just needs a level playing field that all other nations get so that we can develop ourselves and move forward. So please, we're not begging anybody for support. We have what it takes to develop ourselves. Anyway, let's move on to the next story. Some members of staff of the Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Awka, are calling on the school's management to settle arrears of salaries owed. This latest development is coming on the heels of the leadership crisis in the school after the dismissal of Professor Bernard Odo as the Vice-Chancellor by President Bola Tinubu. In a protest march on the school's premises on Thursday, the affected staff number close to 1,000 people say they are being owed over 5 years in salaries and wages. The leader of the group, Ejim Jain, while addressing the media, said since their engagement with the school's management in 2019, the school has paid them. According to them, they have been engaging the management of the school, saying all of them were properly engaged as staff with the offer of employment. So UNIZIC continues to make headlines for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. Rufai, yesterday we spoke to Professor Odo as he made his case. Your take on these developments from that campus? So the
controversy still continues in UNIZIC. I understand that apart from what the president did, the release by the spokesperson of the president as regards to UNIZIC and Odo coming here, Professor Odo coming here to say otherwise, that the president cannot remove him and all of that, it has to be the governing council. I also understand the conversation about university autonomy, but also there's been numerous court cases as regards UNIZIC, and there are many cases in court. And that's why when it comes to UNIZIC matter, I like to stay out of it. Many cases in court as regards even the veracity of Odo, his university, the professorship and all of that he talked about from the Goshua University. But this is another sad one, that people are not being paid their salaries for 5 years. So how do they survive? And when you hear the conversation that we have done a lot for the university system in the country, so it speaks for them. So what has been done for the university system in the country? So much that a university cannot pick up its own bills, cannot pay salaries in the last 5 years. People have been protesting and been engaging, and nothing has been done.
Well, this is not the first time that staff of UNIZIC will complain about salaries not being paid. The last time they did so, they were complaining about 4 years of unpaid salaries. In that regard, there were UNIZIC staff with disabilities who were told, and that the predicament, was a very sorry one. And now, again, at 5 years rating, they are also saying, for 5 years, they have not been paid. The basic principle is an intelligent, commonsensical one. A worker deserves his wages. Whether that worker is disabled or not, whatever the circumstances are, even if you are an ordinary laborer, you also deserve to be paid your wages. And I think that this is an issue that the University of, the UNIZIC University of Nnamdi Azikiwe in Awka, will look into. Management should look at it. Management, this is the responsibility of management to look into it and for the relevant authorities to look into it. The other issue about vice chancellorship. Yesterday, I was telling Professor Bernard Odo not to go there and cause more disruptions that will get him into DSS cell. That same yesterday, I think immediately after this program, the university announced the reappointment of an acting vice chancellor, just to have peace in the university. UNIZIC needs to get itself out of the news for wrong reasons. That's supposed to be a citadel of learning. Why is it that today the issue is about a quarrel with the visitor to the university? Next tomorrow is about salaries not being paid. What is management doing? In a university system, you have management, you have council, you have senate. Management has to do its job. Senate must do its job. We expect better responsibility and discipline from those who are running Nnamdi Azikiwe University, so that their products, both the fake ones and the original ones, if there is anything as a fake product, can be proud of the university and raise their heads high in public, so that some of us who went to very decent universities where we are not having controversies can say, you attended a good university. This is a disservice to the products of UNIZIC.
Absolutely, Dr. Abati. Very, very well said. The back and forth is very unfortunate, especially when issues, at the center of the issue is academia. When we're talking about moving the country forward, when we're talking about the state of the nation, and then the university is embroiled in, this type of chaos, it means that there's not much learning or studying or academia happening at this institution right now. And for me, I'm very passionate about African academic institutions, because it's time for our young people to go and learn the Afrocentric way of thinking, not for us to be shipping our young people out to international universities when they come back and they tell us more about how, Lord Lugard and the IMF are our saviors, as opposed to institutions that will wire our thinking in the right way and teach us the pride and joy of being African academics. So, these types of issues, I really do hope they get settled. Like Rufai said, so many things are before the courts, so one can't really delve into it. But with regards to salaries, when people have worked, their dues should be paid. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar.